Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander very slowly into the strangely fragrant world of ancient Egyptian justice. You're not in courtroom with wooden benches and fluorescent lights. No, tonight you find yourself in Thebes, sometime around 1200 BE, standing at the edge of low-slung sandstone hall. Torches flicker along the colonnades. The air is thick with heat and thicker still with the sweet, smoky scent of burning frankincense. You don't just see the temple court, you smell it. But don't get comfortable. The stone bench where you're about to sit is bit unforgiving. The priest judge might be 6 hours late, and by the time your case is called, someone will have spilled sacred lotus oil on the floor in Uwapos. They'll have to choose between sitting in it or standing barefoot for the rest of the trial. Plus, the defendant is already greased up like a festival statue and definitely smells richer than you. Good luck making your testimony stick. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling extra friendly, let me know your location and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on fam for that soft background, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward, the judge, or more accurately, the priest acting in judicial role, raises hand not to silence you, but to welcome you. He gestures toward the brazier beside him. From it, gentle smoke rises, trailing notes of cedar, cinnamon, and something faintly minty. The fragrance isn't just mood lighting, it's part of the process. Sacred resins like frankincense and myrrh aren't here for decoration. They're believed to purify the air, invite divine presence, and sharpen clarity of mind, which would be helpful because you're about to argue whether your neighbor stole your best goat. Now here's the twist. Your scent too matters. You've slathered yourself with the best oil you could afford, blend of crushed lotus petals and moringa, hoping to look respectable. But the guy across from you, he's practically shimmering with imported Balanos oil from Nubia and Hippos. That's clearly dabbed some kaifite, the ultimate Egyptian fragrance, concocted with over 16 ingredients and usually reserved for gods. You're not just making case, you're in sent off. In ancient Egypt, smell carried meaning far beyond hygiene. It was social code, religious statement, and yes, legal tool. Fragrance marked wealth, status, and piety. Man with clean, fragrant body was presumed to be in good standing with the gods. Person who stank poorly, either poor or suspicious, or just spiritually out of sync. Though it wasn't detail, it was evidence. Historians still argue whether these olfactory rituals were officially codified in law or simply deeply embedded in legal culture. But what's clear is this: the Egyptians believed that purity, especially in the form of scent, connected people to divine order, the cosmic balance that underpinned both law and life. Perfumed litigant might not technically be more honest, but he was more aligned with Matt in that way. Even the most impartial knows you shift your weight. The stone is harder than it looked. The air is thick. The scribe seated nearby is mixing ink with a resin-drenched reed. You're not quite sure what your own smell says about you right now, but your palms are sweaty and you wappos. You read deeply regretting skipping breakfast. There's an awkward moment where Kat walks through the courtroom. No one stops it. It's probably sacred, or judge. Hard to tell sometimes. Priest leans in and whispers something about No's testimony. Wapos are not sure if Hippos that's joking. Apparently, in some cases, the smell of person or an object was enough to raise suspicion. A jar of oil reeking of adulteration might suggest after fraud. A robe with the lingering scent of temple myrrh, possibly stolen property. And if a person smelled too much like a priest but was Napos, a T1. That could mean they'd impersonated clergy. Serious offense. It's not as ridiculous as it sounds. Modern science agrees that smell is memory's secret trigger. If someone insisted stolen vessel had held particular blend of incense, the scent could act as olfactory proof. Of course, that only works if you have really good nose and no allergies. In Egypt's hot climate, scent was ephemeral, always fading, always needing refreshing. That impermanence gave perfume near mystical quality. It was here then gone, like truth, like justice, like your neighbor's suspiciously well-fed goat. So you try to breathe in confidence as your moment arrives. The priest judge nods. You're invited to step forward just past the line where the lotus petals have been scattered. You bow. You try not to trip your sandals slightly in the resin-soaked floor. You begin your plea, voice quavering but firm. The scribe leans in to record. And just as you hit your key argument, yes, the one about seeing your neighbor lead the goat away, you realize no one is looking at you. They're sniffing everyone, even the cat. Because in ancient Egyptian court, it isn't just what you say, it's how you smell when you say it. You keep talking. trying not to notice how intently everyone seems to be inhaling. The priest judge has a serene expression, but his nose twitches ever so slightly. You wonder if he bows, thus picking up your modest blend of lotus and almond oil or the faint aroma of panic sweat now competing for dominance. The defendant, meanwhile, leans back slightly, arms folded, exuding the smug confidence of someone who had enough coin to stop by the temple market this morning and have himself bathed in imported resin. He smells expensive, like diplomacy or hubris. You describe in halting but passionate detail the moment your goat went missing, how you found hoofprints near your neighbor's garden, how the animal's bell, tiny copper chime you carved yourself, was discovered hanging from your neighbor's date palm. The scribe dutifully scratches it all down, but then comes strange pause. The judge raises a small vial from beside his seat. He uncorks it, holds it out towards you, and nods. You blink. What is this? Surprise test? Trick? Cologne-based cross-examination? It's not quite that theatrical, but it is serious. This vial contains a common scent blend used by the temples, something akin to signature fragrance, divine identifier. If someone claims to have been in certain sacred space or temple precinct, the presence of this scent on their body or garments could back them up or betray them. You're being asked without words to identify whether this smell matches the one you allegedly traced on your neighbor's stolen vessel. You take cautious whiff. It's pungent. Cinnamon, juniper, and something woody that could be cypress. Familiar. He nods slowly. Yes, that was it. The smell clung to the goat's collar when you found it. The defendant looks briefly annoyed. Perhaps you've struck a nerve, or just well moisturized one. This isn't quite CSI. Karnak, but in world where written records are sparse, physical proof tricky, and divine will often interpreted through dreams and incense, scent becomes language of its own. Tool, witness, confession. Smell, after all, doesn't lie. At least not as cleverly as people do. Historians argue whether fragrance-based identifications like these were truly common or if they appear only in rare ceremonial trials. But we know that scent played a role in rituals of truth-telling. Before testifying, some Egyptians underwent purification rituals involving incense, oils, and even mild fasting to approach the gods with. A lie on your lips was dangerous. To do it with bad breath and no perfume, practically asking for divine retribution. Of course, not everyone could afford the good stuff. The rich flaunted their imported oils from Punt and Mesopotamia, their vessels shaped like tiny ducks or papyrus reeds filled with substances rarer than gold. The poor might mash wild herbs or scrape perfumed residue from temple refuse. You do what you can. That's why your choice of fragrance today was strategic, affordable, but pious. Blend known to be associated with Thoth, god of scribes, truth, and fellow. You definitely won on your side in court. You don't mention this out loud, but you suspect the priest notices. They always do. The trial proceeds. Your neighbor argues the goat came to him, that it wandered into his garden in state of its own volition. Goat with free will. The move, he claims he fed it, sheltered it, and thus earned its loyalty. Wapozeri not sure if goats work that way. He gestures toward the copper bell you say is yours. It now hangs around his wrist like a bracelet as if mocking you. But then the judge asks him to identify a scent. This time jar pulled from sealed box. It's Kai-Fi again, the complex temple blend used in sacred rites. The defendant hesitates, sniffs, stammers, says something about sweet olives. Everyone frowns. There are no olives in Kai-Fi. Mistake, lie, or just very congested nose? The scribe doesn't flinch. He writes everything down. You wonder if his ink has sent to. There were rumors that certain scribes perfumed their scrolls to deter insects, or maybe just to impress the gods of grammar. Outside, soft wind blows in from the Nile. It brings with it the brackish smell of river mud, blooming reeds, and faint dung, the natural perfume of the city. But here, inside the temple court, it's allspice, oil, and artifice. The layers of scent are heavy, woven into the social fabric as tightly as linen co. You glance down and notice someone lighting a new incense cone near the bench. This one is floral, softer, laced with lotus and henna. It marks a shift in the proceedings, like changing the background music during a tense moment in a film. Smell is pacing. The judge makes a final gesture. You and your neighbor are dismissed while the priestly panel deliberates in silence. But even here, scent fills the space between words. You catch a whiff of tamarisk burning near the doorway, used to ward off spirits of vengeance, comforting, maybe, or ominous. You wait, not daring to sit again on that stone bench. You're sweaty, tired, and starting to crave dates stuffed with honey and crushed tiger nuts. Court snacks, if you will. The temple cat curls near your feet. You wonder if it prefers myrrh or frankincense. It sniffs your sandal, then curls tighter. In this world, every layer of your existence, from how you dress to how you smell, feeds into how truth is judged. Maybe it's unfair. Maybe it's just human. Perfume, in the end, doesn't prove innocence, but it says something. It says you cared enough to prepare to show respect, to believe the gods are listening, even when they're half asleep behind cloud of sandalwood smoke. The deliberation takes longer than expected. You're not sure how long. There are no clocks, just the gradual shift in light filtering through the sandstone columns. The scent of henna and cinnamon is starting to give you headache, or maybe that's the suspense. You shift your weight again, trying to look composed. The temple cat has moved on to Sunbeam. The scribe is dozing with reed pen still tucked behind his ear. Your neighbor is quietly humming to himself, perhaps praying, perhaps just trying to mask his own nerves. He smells less smug now, more overripe. Finally, one of the priest judges clears his throat. Sound that seems amplified tenfold in the echoing chamber. The decision is handed down in voice as common, smooth as warm oil. The goat is to be returned. No formal penalty for your neighbor, but public admonition, sort of official side-eye. You try not to cheer, that would be undignified. You settle for nod, bow, and silent thanks to every minor deity of scent and truth you can recall. As you exit the temple hall, the heavy scents of incense give way to something simpler. The dusty smell of sun-baked earth and dry air, you breathe it in like a man freed from a perfume factory, which in a way you are outside the court. Life flows as usual. Merchants shout in the distance, pushing carts of dried fish and pomegranate wine. But you catch a different scent on the breeze. Floral sharp, almost citrusy. Someone nearby is steeping marjoram. Leaves maybe for cooking, maybe for medicine, or maybe for brewing, sent to be sold in tiny alabaster jars. Perfume in ancient Egypt isn't just for ceremonies or courtrooms. It permeates daily life. From priests to perfumers, from servants to royalty, everyone lives within cloud of intentional fragrance. You decide to follow your nose. Narrow alley leads to cluster of low-walled buildings that house some of the Sidipos. As finest perfumers, these are not merchants who merely resell oil. These are artisans. Chemists, really, who crush, steep, strain, and blend with rituals as sacred as any temple rite. You duck into one of the shops. Inside, the air is rich with the smell of spikenard and green cedar. The woman, middle-aged, sun-darkened skin, fingers stained with resin, looks up from stone mortar. She nods, saying nothing, then goes back to crushing dried blue lotus petals into powder. You ask if she has anything for emotional restoration. She raises an eyebrow. Court case, she asks dryly. You nod. She doesn't laugh, but the corners of her mouth twitch. She pulls out narrow flask and uncorks it. The smell is strange. Lemony but warm. Blend of balm of Gilead, marjoram, and olive oil. You dab it on your wrist. Your pulse slows almost instantly, or maybe thedapos. That's the placebo effect. Either way, Wapos, I'll take it. She tells you the blend was once used by a scribe who worked in the palace archives. Said it helped him concentrate and dream vividly and avoid nosebleeds. Egyptian medicine, like Egyptian law, rarely separates the practical from the mystical. Historians still debate the exact recipes of ancient perfumes. Many formulas have been lost or mistranslated. The Kai-Fi blend alone has over a dozen conflicting recipes. Different temples. Some call for honey and wine, others for raisins, myrrh, and juniper. And no one agrees on the order of blending, the time of day for distillation, or even which gods prefer which versions. It's less recipe than a devotional poem with very fragrant footnotes. You buy the blend anyway, not for clarity or dreams, but for comfort. The smell reminds you of something, place, time, maybe your mother's kitchen or the temple courtyard during midsummer festival. Scent is memory's trickster. After all, you leave the shop and pour the now. Boats drift lazily on the water, sails barely catching the breeze. Someone nearby is drying strips of linen in the sun, and you catch the faint scent of the natron used to clean them. It smells like salty chalk and crushed leaves. Reminder that even cleanliness in Egypt has its own distinct fragrance. You pause by the riverbank, dabbing a bit of your new oil under your nose like priests before ritual. The air is rich with contradictions. Fresh water and fish guts, perfumed priests and sweating laborers, myrrh and manure. Egypt's reality, messy, sacred, and constantly perfumed. As you sit, letting your nerves untangle, you reflect on the surreal way scent threaded through your day. It began as an adornment, became evidence in a court of law, and ended as medicine for your spirit. A boat passes slowly, its hull decorated with painted eyes. The breeze stirs again. You close your eyes and let the smells carry you. Even now, millennia later, archaeologists uncover the ghost scents of ancient Egypt, residues of oil trapped in pottery, bits of myrrh still embedded in burial linens, remnants of Kai-Fi baked into stone altars. It possessed as if the ancient Egyptians knew. We might forget their faces or names, but their sense would whisper on. Some say memory is strongest through vision. Others argue for sound, but here in this river-washed country of gods and goats and courtroom incense, it's the nose that knows.
You wake the next morning with that peculiar ache behind the eyes that only comes from too much sun, too much stress, and possibly too much cinnamon oil rubbed into your temples. But you also wake to a home intact, a goat safely bleeding outside, and the faintly sweet, musky scent of your newly acquired perfume still clinging to your tunic. You breathe in deeply, like a man sniffing victory, though it smells more like aged olive oil and slightly overripe marjoram. Still, it's a comfort. A reminder that, in ancient Egypt, surviving a court case with your dignity intact is no small feat. You step outside into the narrow alleyways of the workers' quarter. The morning smells are vivid: baking barley bread, heated limestone, a touch of garlic from someone's breakfast porridge. Your neighbor avoids your gaze as he passes by, his wrist conspicuously bare now. The goat bell is back in your possession, and you've tied it proudly around your goat's neck like a legal medal. As you make your way to the market, you're drawn again, like a wasp to honey, to the stalls of the perfumers. But today, you're not shopping. You want to understand more. How did scent come to wield such quiet power here? You find an elderly perfumer who works from a shaded stall under a crumbling archway. Her name is Setepenmut, though she tells you to just call her Mut. Her arms are adorned with blue glass bangles that clink like wind chimes when she moves. You ask if she would let you watch her work. She eyes you, shrugs, and gestures to a stool. What follows is less a demonstration and more a slow, hypnotic dance. She begins by heating a mixture of fat, usually castor oil or sometimes beef tallow, until it softens to the consistency of thick honey. Into this, she stirs crushed frankincense resin, which she's pounded with a curved bronze pestle. Then come dried petals, roots, powdered woods, a splash of wine, and, if she's feeling luxurious, a few drops of imported cedar or balsam from the Levant. The mixture simmers and thickens, turning from opaque yellow to a deep, earthy amber. The smell is heady, so much so that you find yourself blinking slower, your breath deepening. Is this relaxation or mild resin intoxication? Hard to tell. Perfume is a memory, Moot says, not looking up. Not of yesterday, of before. You nod, pretending you understand. But something clicks anyway. Historians still argue whether the perfumers of Egypt were mainly practical artisans or spiritual guides. Some claim they were little more than soap sellers with good marketing. Others argue they played crucial roles in religious ceremonies, funerary preparations, and even medicine. The truth, like a good blend, probably lies somewhere in between. Moot shows you her tools: alabaster mixing bowls, small copper strainers, a set of wooden spoons stained black from years of myrrh stirring. She even lets you smell a rare import, essence of labdanum, thick and tarry, scraped from the beards of Mediterranean goats. You pretend to like it, though it smells like burnt sandals. She chuckles at your grimace. Scent, she explains, isn't just for the living. The dead have their own olfactory preferences. Embalmers use natron to dry out bodies, but afterward they anoint the corpse with sacred oils: kefi, frankincense, cedar, lotus. The belief is that scent can guide the soul through the underworld, or at least help it smell presentable when meeting Osiris. You wonder aloud if there's a perfume designed to ward off judgment. Mute laughs again, this time louder. If there is, it's made of lies and crocodile spit, she says. Speaking of crocodiles, she hands you a jar labeled in rough hieratic script. You hesitate. Go on, she urges. You uncap the lid. It hits you immediately. Sour, pungent, animalic. Crocodile dung. It's for fertility, she says, completely serious. Mixed with honey and rubbed on the thighs. Not for wearing, unless you want to repel every eligible partner in Memphis. You put the lid back on quickly. Fringe uses like this are common in Egypt's sprawling olfactory universe. Scent wasn't always about smelling pleasant. It could be used to treat illness, induce visions, mark status, or deter pests. There's even record of a blend designed specifically to make the wearer invisible to snakes. Whether it worked is, shall we say, under peer review. By midday, the sun is scorching. Moot covers her pots with linen and sits back, fanning herself with a dried papyrus sheet. You thank her for the lesson and rise slowly, your tunic now infused with a dozen competing aromas. As you walk away, your mind spins with images: priests wafting incense before golden statues, Widows anointing the linen of their loved ones, merchants selling genuine Nubian myrrh that's probably just goat fat with crushed raisins. A whole world, layered in scent. You pause at a food stall, tempted by roasted duck glazed with date syrup. The smell makes your stomach growl. But what really catches your attention is the vendor himself. He's wearing a thin strip of cloth soaked in mint oil tied around his forehead, apparently to keep his thoughts cool. You have no idea if it works, but it's definitely trending. That's the thing with ancient Egypt. Nothing is purely functional, and nothing is purely symbolic. Even the perfume worn to a court trial is doing double duty. It's truth serum and spiritual armor. It's aesthetic and legal strategy. You return home, belly full, head fuzzy, body fragrant. Your goat greets you with a grumpy bleat, perhaps disappointed you didn't bring a snack. You pat her head anyway, and then you lie down, the scent of marjoram still clinging to your fingers, and you wonder, not for the first time, how something as fleeting as perfume came to be written into the laws of the land. You're up early again the next morning, but this time it's not because of stress, it's curiosity. The kind of quiet, aromatic curiosity that seeps into your thoughts and nudges at your ribs until you have no choice but to follow it. Today's destination, the House of Life. That sounds grander than it is. In reality, it's a low, shaded annex beside the Temple of Thoth, part school, part library, part sacred archive. You've heard whispers that this is where scribes are trained, medical scrolls are stored, and certain very privileged individuals learn the deeper uses of scent. Not just for rituals, but for healing. You pass through the sandstone courtyard, sandals slapping softly against the cool stone. Palm trees rustle overhead. Somewhere behind the temple walls, a priest is already chanting. The air smells of oil, papyrus, and ink, and faintly, sandalwood from a nearby brazier. A young apprentice greets you. He's barely past boyhood, with ink-stained fingers and a suspiciously smug expression. Clearly someone who knows his way around a scroll shelf. When you mention your interest in the uses of perfume and healing, he perks up. "Come," he says. "I'll show you the scroll. It has drawings." You follow him into a cool chamber lined with pigeonhole shelves, each stacked with rolled papyrus scrolls tied with twine. He retrieves one labeled "On the Management of Odors in the Sickly Body." Catchy title. As he unfurls it carefully on a polished stone slab, you see the familiar hieratic script, peppered with tiny ink illustrations. A human figure with something steaming on their head, a hand holding a blossom to a nose, a figure vomiting, charming. He explains that scent was used in Egyptian medicine not just to mask illness, but to actively treat it. Certain smells were believed to drive out demons, others to balance the humors. A concept that basically meant correcting bodily misbehavior without quite understanding anatomy. Still, the effects were real enough. For fevers, healers burned acacia pods and had patients inhale the smoke. For headaches, they applied compresses soaked in vinegar and mint oil. And for melancholy, a diagnosis applied very loosely, they prescribed warm baths infused with lotus, myrrh, and rose. Historians still debate whether these treatments were pharmacologically effective or simply aromatic placebos. But given that a peppermint-scented poultice still soothes headaches today, maybe the ancients knew a thing or two after all. The apprentice smirks and points to a drawing of a man with a cone of what looks like frosting on his head. "Perfume cone," he says. "For funerals. Also weddings. Sometimes just for parties." You remember seeing those cones on tomb paintings, like melting hats of celebration, but you hadn't realized they were real, or real-ish. Recent studies suggest those cones were made from animal fat and wax, infused with oils like frankincense or lily. They'd melt slowly over the scalp in the heat, releasing fragrance over hours, the equivalent of a very slow-burning air freshener strapped to your skull. You wonder what it would feel like, refreshing or deeply greasy? Probably both. The apprentice fetches a small clay model from a shelf, a replica of such a cone. You sniff it. It's floral and sweet, but also slightly rancid. He shrugs. "It's been here a while." He leads you to another chamber, where an older scribe is busy copying a scroll by lamplight. The smell of ink and warm oil is almost intoxicating in the still air. The scribe glances up, takes one whiff of you, and nods approvingly. "Marjoram," he murmurs, "good for nightmares." Apparently your scent precedes you. The apprentice explains that the House of Life is also where embalming recipes are kept. though those are guarded carefully, whispered from master to apprentice rather than written down in full. Still, fragments appear in the scrolls. Oils for preserving the liver, perfumes for anointing the toes. Scent, in the afterlife, is not a luxury, it's a passport. Even ordinary people, when buried, were often anointed with a final blend of oil and resin. A goodbye kiss from the world of the living. It smells of pine, wine, and permanence. One scribe, centuries ago, even recorded a recipe for a scent meant to calm the soul in transit. It included blue lotus, cedar, juniper berries, and honey wine. Whether it calmed the soul or merely masked the smell of mortality, we'll never know. You thank the apprentice and step back out into the courtyard. The sun is higher now, and the air is heavier. As you breathe in, you realize something subtle has shifted. You're starting to read your world through your nose. The smell of the courtyard stone, warmed to just the edge of baking. The faint trace of lotus in a passing priestess's perfume. The burnt, almondy scent of someone roasting tiger nuts nearby. You're not just moving through space, you're cataloging it in scent. You head to the Nile again because it seems the only place that's wide enough to hold this flood of sensation. There, near a shaded dock, you find a man sitting cross-legged beside a wooden box. He's blending something slowly with a long bronze spoon. You sit beside him. He doesn't speak. He just holds out a dab of what he's mixing. You smell it. It's faintly spicy, cool, sharp, like crushed coriander and lemon peels soaked in wine. For clarity, he says at last, before prayer. You nod, and for a moment you just sit there, side by side, breathing in clarity. The scent is light, but it stays with you all the way home. You return home with the scent of clarity still clinging to your skin. Coriander, lemon, a hint of something waxy and unfamiliar. It's comforting, even as the evening heat begins to press down like a damp curtain. You might think now's a good time to nap, but your neighbor's camel has other ideas. It's bleeding in that unholy door hinge meets hornet way camels do when left alone too long. So instead of sleep, you lean into the moment and into memory. Specifically, the memory of last week's court dispute involving the fish vendor, the priest, and that little jar of lily oil. Quite possibly the most fragrant argument ever recorded on a clay docket. See, courtrooms in ancient Egypt weren't just about scrolls, oaths, and scribes. They were sensory spaces. Perfumes were used not just for cleanliness or decorum, but sometimes as literal evidence. Take the aforementioned fish vendor. He'd been accused of selling spoiled perch while falsely claiming it had been smoked in holy temple cedar oil. Now, perch is one thing, but invoking temple resources? That got the priesthood involved. And priests, as it turns out, take their cedar oil very seriously. You recall how the scribe read aloud a list of ingredients found in the vendor's workshop while jars were opened for the courtroom to sniff. It quickly became clear. No cedar, no holiness. Just something that smelled like aged turnips and regret. The vendor's defense? The oil was blessed in proximity to the temple. Historians still argue whether that proximity loophole ever held legal weight. Some fragments of law suggest that even indirect contact with sacred items could be claimed as legit. Others say that's just the ancient version of, I didn't plagiarize, I paraphrased. Ultimately, the court ruled against him, not just for fraud, but for olfactory offense. You remember the judge's exact words, translated roughly as, this oil dishonors both fish and gods. He was fined, and the jar of fake oil was ritually smashed. That memory opens a whole drawer in your mind labeled legal uses of perfume, and you start to realize how common it was. Not just in fraud cases, but in ritual purity hearings, accusations of witchcraft, even inheritance disputes. One particularly famous case involved a widow named Tia, who claimed her late husband's brother had stolen a precious vial of her dowry perfume, an imported blend of myrrh and blue lotus, supposedly from Punt. You can picture the courtroom now, Tia, veiled but visibly fuming, the accused awkwardly clutching a sealed alabaster jar, the judge asking both parties to open it and smell. They did. It reeked of camel grease and fennel, nothing like the genuine article. The judge ordered the jar opened fully and poured on the floor, right there in court. A crowd of witnesses leaned in, sniffed, and recoiled. There were even recorded reactions in the scribe's margin, smelled of sour grain, turned 3 noses, and caused 1 sneeze. Tia won her case. The fake jar was destroyed, and she received compensation in the form of grain, beer, and a small gold ring. No perfume, though. That was harder to come by than justice. And then there's the matter of scent as proof of character. In some legal codes, a person's odor was cited in arguments about social standing. It was said that a virtuous person would smell faintly of lilies and palm wine, while someone of suspect morals might carry the tang of neglect, or worse, cheap perfume mixed with sweat. You think that might still hold up in modern courts, come to think of it. There are even ancient letters from village elders petitioning higher officials for assistance in disputes, sometimes mentioning scent in their complaints. One particularly juicy line from a letter dated to around 1100 BCE reads, "He came into the hall reeking of imported musk and lies." Now that's poetry. It wasn't all petty, though. In some cases, scent played a part in restorative justice. When someone wronged a neighbor, particularly in familial or community matters, part of the reconciliation could involve the gift of perfume, a gesture of sweetness to restore balance. In one recorded event, a man accused of slander offered the offended party a jar of rose oil alongside his formal apology. The scroll notes, "Peace was restored. The oil was shared among their wives." You can imagine it, the slightly awkward but sincere passing of a fragrant jar, a nod, maybe even a chuckle, the unspoken language of scent doing what words couldn't. Historians still debate whether these restorative perfume offerings had actual legal standing or were just cultural customs tacked onto legal settlements. Either way, the gesture mattered. Perfume was a symbol of status, of sincerity, of sanctity. You glance over at your own modest collection, a tiny jar of lotus-scented balm, a cone of kiffy resin you've been too nervous to light, and a crumbly chunk of myrrh wrapped in linen. Not exactly court evidence material. But still you wonder, what would your scent say about you in a legal trial? Defendant entered the chamber smelling of river wind and overripe dates. Not bad, honestly. As twilight starts to turn the walls of your home pink, you light a small oil lamp. The flame sputters, then steadies. You lean closer, inhaling the faint trace of past perfumes baked into the clay bowl, smoke, rose, maybe even that lemony clarity again. You close your eyes and listen. A scribe's brush whispering on papyrus, the faint thud of court sandals, the quiet gasp of a sniffed jar gone wrong, and underneath it all, the knowledge that once upon a time, someone could win or lose a legal case based on a single breath. The next morning, you're woken not by the camel, but by an aroma, sweet, resinous, and definitely intentional. You sniff the air like a sleepy bloodhound. Frankincense. Someone is burning it nearby, and it's wafting in like a polite guest you didn't invite but don't mind entertaining. You rise slowly, wrap your shawl, and wander toward the scent. It's coming from the home of Anan, the old man who talks to pigeons and wears the same linen tunic every day like it's a uniform. He's hosting a purification rite. That sounds fancy, but it's really more like a home deep clean with spiritual overtones. Ancient Egyptians didn't just scrub their homes with water, they fumigated them with perfume, especially before major events, births, deaths, festivals, or even just because someone had been sick and sneezing ominously into the walls. You step into the threshold and are met with a cloud of steam and smoke. Anan waves you in with a grin, offering you a small bundle of damp linen. "Hold this to your nose," he says, "unless you enjoy sneezing for sport." You accept it gratefully, pressing it over your face. The scent inside is something like rose petals soaked in vinegar, a crude but effective nose filter. The room is warm and hazy. Women are fanning coals with palm fronds, while a priest hums something half-sung, half-muttered. On a wide ceramic tray sit bowls of resins and woods, frankincense, myrrh, balsam, sandalwood. Some are powdered, others thick and sticky, like amber honey. Each ingredient has a function. Frankincense for banishing illness, myrrh to sanctify the space, balsam for purification, and sandalwood just to make the whole ordeal slightly more bearable. They're fed into a clay censer shaped like a lotus, its petals curled open like it's perpetually sighing. Smoke rises in slow ribbons, twisting into the ceiling beams like ghostly silk threads. You take a deep breath and immediately understand why this was a household ritual. It feels like a full reset, not just of your nose, but your nerves. Historians still debate whether these rituals were considered medical or purely spiritual. The line was fuzzy. Disease was believed to be caused by malevolent forces, sometimes spirits, sometimes the displeasure of gods, sometimes just bad air. So naturally, countering it with good-smelling air made sense. One scroll mentions the ritual of 70 breaths, where a house is fumigated until the priest has inhaled the sacred blend 70 times. You imagine how lightheaded that would make you, or just very, very ready for a nap. There's also evidence that some households made their own fumigation blends, like families have recipes for soup. One common mixture included dried mint, crushed juniper berries, and powdered acacia bark. Affordable, effective, and less likely to make guests faint from grandeur. And then there was kifi. You've heard whispers about kifi before, Egypt's legendary multi-ingredient incense, said to contain up to 16 different components: wine, raisins, honey, myrrh, cinnamon, henna, and, well, it's complicated. It was burned at night, not just for rituals, but as a sleep aid. Yes, the ancient Egyptians invented nighttime aromatherapy long before essential oil influencers did. The idea was that kifi soothed the soul and aided dream clarity. Even Herodotus, the Greek historian, wrote about it with a kind of wide-eyed reverence, like he'd just inhaled heaven. Anan gestures for you to help. You pinch a small ball of kifi paste between your fingers, sticky, grainy, oddly fruity, and drop it onto the censer. It sizzles, then smokes. The scent is unlike anything else, sweet, spicy, medicinal, and oddly nostalgic. You realize something profound. Scent is memory. And for these people, it was also protection, a barrier against illness, a message to the gods, a way to wrap your home in invisible armor. Anan grins at your expression. Better than pigeon cooing, yes? Definitely. He offers you a cup of warm beer, healing in its own questionable way, and begins to talk about his youth. About how his mother would fumigate their home every new moon with a special blend that no one else in the neighborhood dared use. She said it made the ghosts drowsy, he chuckles. You imagine that. Ghosts drifting around like sleepwalkers, too mellow to haunt anyone. It's a strangely comforting image. Historians still argue whether purification rites were effective in reducing actual disease, or whether their benefits were purely psychological. But isn't that the same with half the rituals we still perform today? You help tidy up as the ritual winds down. The censer is emptied, the windows open slightly, and the bowls are rinsed with perfumed water. The room smells like a calm forest having a very clean nap. Back outside, the sun has moved higher, casting a golden hue on the mud brick walls. Children run past, trailing dust and laughter. You catch a faint whiff of kifi on your skin, still clinging. It's then that you understand the secret to the ancient Egyptians' love of scent. It wasn't just about smelling good, it was about shaping experience, making the invisible world of memory, of mood, of the divine, just a little more tangible. You return home, set out your own censer, and make a mental note. Next market day, you're buying dried raisins and henna. You might not master the full kifi recipe, but you can at least lull your ghosts into a nap. Later that afternoon, you decide to visit the local scribe, not because you need a letter written, but because his wife, Nefer, is rumored to make the best hand-ground perfume in the neighborhood. Plus, she owes you a favor since you helped her carry 6 jars of barley last flood season. You pass through the narrow alley, ducking under drying linen and sidestepping a goat that looks suspiciously like it knows your schedule. As you arrive at their house, a shaded compound with ivy creeping along its baked clay walls, you hear the scratch of reed brush on papyrus and the faint bubbling of something stewing over coals. Nefer greets you with a grin and a smudge of resin on her cheek. "You're just in time," she says, waving you toward the courtyard where several bowls are laid out like a perfumer's feast. Tonight she's making a blend she calls Pharaoh's Afternoon Nap. It includes crushed rose petals, cedar shavings, cinnamon, and surprisingly goat fat. Because yes, ancient perfume wasn't always floral elegance. Sometimes it was greasy. You peer into the mixing bowl. It's a little like watching alchemy. She stirs the melted fat with a carved wooden paddle, adding the floral bits bit by bit. The scent changes with each stir, from earthy to spicy to downright delicious. Your stomach growls. She laughs. Every good Egyptian perfume begins with fat. She says, dabbing some onto her wrist with a reed stick. It's what keeps the scent on your skin. Historians still debate whether animal fat was always the base, or if plant oils were used more commonly in certain regions. There are fragments suggesting both methods existed side by side: goat fat for local affordable blends, imported oils like moringa and castor for luxury concoctions. Nefer hands you a dab of the perfume and motions to your forearm. You rub it in, then sniff. You smell like someone who's just walked through a cedar grove while holding a cinnamon bun. It's glorious. She then explains the art of aging perfumes. Some were used fresh, but many, especially royal blends, were stored in cool chambers for weeks, even months, before use. The aging allowed scents to deepen, fuse, and mellow. You nod, as though you understand. Internally, you're marveling that ancient Egyptians were basically scent sommeliers. She shows you a few other mixtures in various stages of readiness. One smells like fermented fruit and crushed leaves, definitely not ready. Another is bright and citrusy, made with lemon balm and mint. This one's for stomach aches, she says. You rub it on your belly and hope the gods are in a good mood. Medicinal perfumes were their own category. You'd heard of temples producing ointments for everything from joint pain to snake bites. Some even doubled as religious offerings, medicine for the body and the soul. One blend mentioned in temple scrolls included myrrh, coriander, and something called sweet rush, believed to ease anxiety and promote restful sleep. You wonder if that's what your neighbor burns at night when his baby won't stop crying. Nefer tells you about the time a noblewoman brought her a sealed jar of king's perfume, a blend gifted by a visiting dignitary. Smelled like old figs and arrogance, she chuckles. But I didn't say that out loud. You ask if she ever made perfume for legal reasons, say to settle a dispute. Her eyebrows rise. Once, she says, I made a scent for a woman who'd been accused of lying in court. She believed if she wore a blend of lotus and honey while confessing, the gods would know she was truthful. Did it work? She was acquitted, but she also bribed the judge with 2 baskets of pomegranates, so who knows? Historians still argue whether such scented rituals held sway over verdicts, or if they simply made the accused smell more convincing. Maybe both. Nefer hands you a small jar, her thanks for the barley carrying. It's wrapped in linen and tied with a reed cord. She leans in. This one's made with saffron and crushed date seeds. It's not for court, it's for dreams. You tuck it into your sash like treasure. As the sun dips behind the palm-lined riverbank, the scribe himself finally appears, covered in ink and muttering about grammar. He nods to you, but avoids eye contact with the perfume bowls, like a man who's lost too many arguments involving rose oil and storage space. You thank Nefer again and begin your walk home, fingers still scented from the trial dabs. Each step kicks up dust and fragrance, a slow blend of perfume and pavement, history and habit. It strikes you then just how many layers ancient Egyptian perfume had, not just in ingredients but in meaning. It was luxury and medicine. It was courtroom strategy and bedroom charm. It was daily ritual, spiritual defense, economic signal. You didn't just wear it, you announced yourself with it. And now as a soft wind carries the scent of cinnamon from your sleeve, you feel yourself less like a bystander in this ancient world, and more like a participant. A smelly one, yes, but dignified. At home, you light a wick soaked in cedar oil and sit by the window, letting your skin absorb the day's story. Nefer's gift tucked nearby, waiting for dreams. The next day begins with a quiet knock at your door, a messenger, barefoot, holding a folded linen slip and a face that suggests this is either a summons or a polite threat. You accept the note, unroll it, and read. Presence requested at the Hall of Records. Dispute pending. Bring your nose. That last line might be a joke. You hope it's a joke. You gather your things, adjust your sash, and follow the messenger through winding streets, past acacia trees and lazy cats, until you arrive at the city's administrative heart, the Hall of Records. It's cooler inside, thanks to thick stone walls and high ceilings. Papyrus scrolls line shelves like a library dreamed up by someone who likes dust and bureaucracy. At the center is a group of officials, all fanning themselves with identical boredom. A man stands nearby, pacing nervously. His name is Meni. He's a cloth merchant, and he's currently locked in a very fragrant disagreement with his neighbor, Hedifer, a brewer who accuses Meni of sabotaging a business deal by, wait for it, smelling suspiciously like someone else. Apparently, Meni had recently worn a perfume blend that was the signature scent of a rival trader. Hedifer claims it confused a buyer into thinking Meni represented that rival, causing chaos, cancellations, and a rather soggy contract signed in the wrong name. Yes, in ancient Egypt, your scent could have legal implications. You inhale sharply and almost regret it. The room is dense with heat, nerves, and the unmistakable tang of myrrh. You're here not as a witness, but as a scent advisor. You've been learning from perfumers and healers, priests and vendors. Word travels fast when your robes carry hints of sandalwood and saffron. The officials begin. Many and Heddifer each take a turn telling their side, gesturing wildly and name-dropping every known spice and resin like they're reciting a grocery list from the gods. You focus on one detail. Many admits he bought a small jar of used perfume oil from a traveling peddler, thinking it would help him stand out during a market deal. He didn't know it mimicked the scent of his competitor. Historians still argue whether signature scents in Egypt were intentionally protected, like a trademark, or simply recognized by familiarity. What's clear, though, is that scent held symbolic power, enough that using the wrong one could cause confusion, or in rare cases, legal trouble. One of the scribes pulls out a scroll listing previous scent-related disputes. You glance over his shoulder and see gems like, "Woman accused of stealing temple incense by wearing it in public." "Farmer claims neighbor's oil blend lured away his bees." "Priest disputes claim that his myrrh smelled inferior to another's." You nearly laugh. Nearly. The official calls for the evidence, the small alabaster jar of perfume many purchased. It's opened with care. Everyone leans in. You do too. It smells expensive. Strong notes of spikenard and balsam with an afterwhiff of dried plum. Definitely not your average market mix. Probably imported. And yes, definitely associated with that particular rival. You nod solemnly. It's a mimic blend, you say. Not uncommon among street vendors, but confusing in matters of trade. They scribble that down like it's divine revelation. Many gulps. Heddifer looks smug. But you continue gently. However, there's no proof of intent, just poor choice in vendors. One of the older scribes strokes his beard. "So he merely smelled wrong at the wrong time?" You nod again. "Exactly." They deliberate. There's talk of restitution in the form of barley, or perhaps a shared market stall for 1 week, so both parties can clarify their brands. By scent, of course. In the end, Many is asked to publicly discard the offending perfume and promise to wear only blends made by recognized perfumers from now on. It's a win, sort of. He thanks you afterward, pressing a wrapped fig into your hand as thanks. "It's all I've got until next harvest," he says. As you leave, you reflect on what just happened. Perfume in this world is not fluff. It's language, identity, even legal evidence. It can sway a deal, affirm a promise, or, in many's case, torpedo an entire afternoon of negotiations. Historians still debate whether perfume disputes like this were common or just well-documented oddities. But one thing is certain. Ancient Egyptians didn't take their aromas lightly. As you step back into the sun, you realize your own scent is layered now. Nefer's saffron blend still lingers beneath a faint trace of courtroom myrrh. It's oddly fitting. You smell like someone who just negotiated the olfactory equivalent of a lawsuit. You make your way home through market crowds, your mind swirling with resins, reputations, and regretful merchants. And just as you pass the pottery stall, you hear a woman mutter to her friend, "That's the one who settled the scent case." You smile. The fig in your pocket smells like sweet justice. By the time you reach your street, the shadows have grown long and the air has cooled just enough for everyone to re-emerge from their shaded corners. You pass a neighbor anointing her doorstep with oil, frankincense mixed with juniper, you guess, probably to ward off bad dreams or hungry cats, or maybe just because it smells nice. With Egyptians, it's always hard to tell where ritual ends and daily life begins. At your own doorstep, you pause. The little jar Nefer gave you, the saffron and date blend, is tucked away in your satchel. You decide to open it again, just to remind yourself that your day, however strange, began with luxury. The smell is softer now, rounded by time and sun. It's like walking past a bakery that also happens to sell incense. You lean against the doorframe and let yourself rest for a moment. Tomorrow, you've heard, there's a procession at the Temple of Hathor, goddess of love, music, and, you guessed it, perfume. Offerings will be made, chants sung, and rare oils burned in those massive alabaster burners that make the entire courtyard smell like honeyed wood and crushed blossoms. You make a mental note to attend. Not for the ritual exactly, but to study how they mix the oils. Purely academic, of course. Inside your house, there's a tiny clay niche near your bed, everyone has one, for holding a lamp and maybe a small dish of something fragrant. Tonight, you place Nefer's jar there. One drop is enough to scent the entire room. As you settle onto your mat, your mind drifts. It wanders to the earliest perfumes, the ones created not for fashion or flirtation, but for the dead. You've heard stories, some from temple priests, others whispered in marketplaces, of how ancient embalmers would spend days crafting a unique fragrance for the recently deceased. Not just to mask the inevitable, but to guide the soul through the duat, the labyrinthine afterlife. One such tale sticks with you. A woman named Sitkamut, daughter of a high priest, died young. Her father, distraught, commissioned a perfume made from lotus, myrrh, crushed almonds, and something the scrolls refer to only as desert wind. Scholars still argue about what that could mean, perhaps a rare plant that only bloomed after sandstorms, or a euphemism for a scent harvested under special lunar conditions. The embalmers crafted her funeral blend with such care that her tomb still carried its trace when it was opened over 1,000 years later, faint but real. The scent of grief preserved like a prayer. You lie back, staring at the flickering oil lamp, and imagine being one of those perfumers, stooped over a table of petals, resins, and powders, knowing your work won't be worn to dinner or to court, but on a journey through eternity. Even now, historians and archaeologists find sealed alabaster jars in tombs, their contents hardened, darkened, but still faintly aromatic. Some have attempted to recreate these perfumes, decoding recipes from temple walls and shipping manifests. Others argue it's impossible. We'll never know exactly how they smelled, only what they meant. You roll onto your side, your cheek against a cool linen pillow, and wonder what your own scent might have been, had you lived then not as an onlooker, but as someone buried in a tomb alongside oil jars and perfumed linens. Would they say, "Ah yes, the one who smelled like saffron and goat jokes"? A soft chuckle escapes you, maybe. Outside, a breeze lifts the linen curtain just slightly, letting in a ripple of nighttime air and the scent of someone's evening incense. Possibly pine resin, possibly an offering, possibly just someone who overdid it. You're not sure when you last thought this much about smell, but in Egypt you're learning fragrance is memory, it's identity, it's love, status, prayer, justice. Perfume is presence and absence, and every nuance in between. Your eyelids begin to droop, and your thoughts float just slightly off course. You picture the temple jars, dozens of them, labeled in a script you can almost but not quite read, each one sealed tight, each one waiting for the right moment to open, like dreams. Morning begins not with sunlight, but with scent. You stir awake to the lingering softness of Nefer's saffron blend still cradled in the clay niche. Outside your window, someone is cooking lentils spiced with cumin and coriander. You inhale deeply, and for a moment it feels like you've slept inside a spice market, minus the yelling. As you stretch, you notice something new tucked beneath your door, a palm leaf note, hastily knotted with red thread. You unfurl it and find a simple message, Temple of Hathor, mid-morning. Bring your nose again. You sigh, smile, and get dressed. The procession is already forming when you arrive. Women in flowing linen gowns, musicians with hand drums and flutes, and priests carrying trays of perfume jars as if they were sacred relics, which, in this context, they are. One priest approaches you. He's older, with the kind of weathered face that suggests he spent a lifetime squinting into smoke. "You're the one from the scent case," he says, nodding sagely. "We could use your help." You're led inside the inner court, where a group of younger initiates are attempting to reconstitute an ancient perfume recipe inscribed on a temple wall. The trouble is, some of the ingredients no longer exist, or worse, are mistranslated. What exactly is black water of the sycamore? Is essence of the blue moon metaphor or measurement? Historians still argue about many of these terms. Some believe black water referred to a fermented tree sap. Others claim it was simply a poetic way of saying really old water. You're handed a small, shallow dish filled with a thick, amber-colored paste. It smells like myrrh, and dates had a heated debate, and no one won. The head perfumer is watching you. "It's missing something," he says. "It doesn't sing." You take a cautious sniff. There's warmth, yes. Bitterness, yes. But no lift. Nothing floral or high-pitched to pull the rest of the notes upward. You suggest a dash of blue lotus oil, rare, expensive, but known to induce a mild euphoria when burned. The initiates pause. One disappears into the back. When he returns, he's carrying a jar no bigger than your thumb, sealed with beeswax. The seal is cracked, the oil stirred in, and soon the air changes. Now it sings. The head perfumer closes his eyes and smiles. That's it. That's the note that calls to Hathor. The mixture is portioned out into 5 small alabaster flasks, each one sealed with linen and resin, ready to be carried in the procession. You're offered a place among the perfume bearers, which is a bit like being asked to hold a firework that smells expensive and is also sacred. You walk slowly, barefoot, the sun warming the stone beneath you. Musicians play a hypnotic rhythm, and petals fall from baskets above, catching in your hair and the folds of your tunic. As you pass the outer walls of the temple, people reach out, not to touch you, but to catch a hint of the scent. It's believed that even inhaling the goddess's fragrance can bring good fortune, or at least chase off a bad hangover. A lot of people are probably here for that second one. At the heart of the procession, a high priestess anoints the temple statue with the mixture you helped refine. Thick plumes of smoke rise into the sky, curling and twisting like serpents of scent. You close your eyes and imagine them carrying prayers, not in words, but in fragrance, upward, outward, beyond the walls of the city, and into the realm of the divine. And then, because this is still Egypt and reality always has its own flair, a goat eats one of the flower baskets. You open your eyes. Yep, a goat, just munching petals like it owns the place. Nobody seems particularly alarmed. In fact, one of the children watching claps and declares it an omen of luck. Historians have no consensus on this interpretation. Later, back at the temple's shaded courtyard, you're given a small token, a ceramic pendant in the shape of a lotus, glazed in sky blue. For your nose, says the priest, smiling. You tuck it into your sash and accept a cool cup of barley water from one of the servers. The procession may be over, but the scent lingers. Perfume, you're beginning to understand, is the medium through which Egyptians communicate not only with each other, but with gods, memories, and mysteries too dense for language alone. It bridges breath and belief. You sit quietly, sipping barley water, listening to the distant rhythm still echoing off the temple walls. A woman nearby is humming a hymn to Hathor, something about beauty, sweetness, and cow horns. You don't understand every word, but you understand the tone. It smells like reverence. The afternoon settles like honey over Thebes, thick, golden, and slow. You find yourself wandering again, this time with no real destination, just the faint trail of a lingering perfume in your nose and the clink of the lotus pendant at your hip. The streets are quieter now. The markets have shuttered for the midday rest, and even the cats have disappeared into the shadows. Only the occasional lazy croak from a rooftop pigeon breaks the silence. You drift toward the river. The Nile glimmers under the heat, not quite welcoming but not unfriendly either. A few reed boats drift lazily past, fishermen half asleep at the oars. On the far bank, a temple rises like a mirage, its columns etched with stories in stone, some of which you've now smelled firsthand. As you follow the embankment, you pass a small perfume shop you hadn't noticed before. It doesn't even have a name, just a painted symbol above the door, a nose with wings, very subtle. Inside, it's dim and cool. Shelves line the walls, stacked with tiny jars and tiny prices that aren't, in fact, tiny at all. A woman behind the counter eyes you, her gaze as sharp as clove oil. "You've got priest smell," she says flatly. You blink. "Been at a procession, haven't you? Smells like blue lotus and sweaty linen." You admit she's not wrong. She gestures for you to come closer, then uncorks a jar the size of a pigeon's egg and holds it under your nose. It smells like burned oranges and temple incense, smoky, citrusy, oddly addictive. "Kiffy," she says, "the original kind, not the watered-down stuff they sell to tourists." Ah, Kiffy, the legendary temple blend. Described by ancient Greek travelers as a nighttime incense, Kiffy was part perfume, part medicine, part mystical air freshener. Recipes varied, sometimes including honey, raisins, wine, frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, juniper berries, and even dried acacia pods. Historians still debate whether it was meant to be inhaled, drunk, or applied directly to the skin. Some say it cured insomnia, others say it summoned dreams. You ask what's in her version. She smiles. a secret, but let's just say it won't help you sleep unless you're ready to meet a few gods. Not ominous at all. You politely decline to inhale any deeper and browse the shelves instead. There's an entire section labeled courtroom oils, and you have to ask. Those, she says, are for persuasion, not bribes, just nudges. You pick up one labeled Voice of Mott. It smells like cool sandalwood and something sweetly metallic, supposedly used by temple scribes during depositions. Another jar, Tears of Thoth, smells almost sour like tamarind and rust. For truth spells, the woman explains. Useful when you need someone to admit they broke the amphora. Then you spot one you didn't expect, Widow's Appeal. The scent is almost heartbreakingly soft. Rose water, cardamom, and something smoky underneath. She nods when you raise an eyebrow. Worn by women when testifying in inheritance cases, she says. Grief, but elegant, enough to make a judge listen. The idea that scent could sway justice isn't so far-fetched. After all, this is a culture that believed in weighing hearts against feathers, that embalmed with as much care as they debated, that scented its gods and its grievances alike. You purchase a small vial labeled Memory of the Market, a blend of lemon peel, dust, and, if you're not mistaken, roasted barley. It's oddly comforting, like a street corner at sunset. As you leave, the woman calls after you. Don't wear it to a funeral unless you want to get compliments. Duly noted. Outside, the heat has shifted. The city is waking up again. Doors creak open, traders sweep stoops, and a child runs past you carrying what smells suspiciously like a stolen cinnamon cake. You make your way back toward the perfume court, and along the way, pause near a street mural. It shows an ancient court scene, a judge holding scales, a man testifying with his hand raised, and curiously, a servant offering what appears to be a bowl of smoke. Perfume again, a scent to clear the air or cloud it. You wonder how many verdicts were swayed by well-placed scent, how many lies cloaked in frankincense, how many truths sweetened by lotus. Historians may argue forever about the exact recipes, the precise meanings. But here, on the painted wall of a back street, it's clear. Smell mattered, not just as ornament, but as language, as tool, as presence. And as you continue your walk, nose still tuned, mind still adrift, you start to imagine your own courtroom strategy. Step 1, arrive early. Step 2, wear something subtle. Step 3, maybe avoid goat-scented tunics. It's a work in progress. Evening is beginning to stretch across the Nile like a cat across cool tile, lazy, graceful, and not in any particular hurry. The sun's rays spill long and gold down the alleys, gilding the dust and casting the perfumed world of Thebes in a sleepy haze. You return to the perfumer's court, unsure if you're expected or simply drawn by habit now. The scent trail, like a familiar song, leads you back. Inside, a small group is gathered around Nefer, who's seated beside a polished stone table. On it, 6 alabaster bottles arranged in a triangle. Each bears a symbol, a feather, a flame, a reed, a falcon, a jug, and something that might be a beetle doing yoga. We're about to play a game, Nefer says without looking up, one that predates your grandfather's memory. It's called Scent of Judgment. Want to play? Of course you do. The rules are vague. Someone places a few drops from one of the bottles onto a strip of papyrus. The rest of the group smells it, considers it, and then silently writes down what kind of case it should be used in. Divorce, theft, land dispute, temple violation, fish tax evasion. You know, the usual. The goal isn't to win. It's to think like an ancient judge, with your nose. The first scent is sharp, ginger maybe, with a smoky base. You imagine an argument over land boundaries, possibly involving a goat, and scribble property dispute plus stubborn livestock. Nefer reveals the answer. Used in cases of oath-breaking. Strong, clean, and cuts through excuses. You nod sagely, like that was your second guess. Another blend is floral but oddly melancholy. Notes of chamomile, blue lotus, and crushed linen. It reminds you of waiting in a quiet room where no one's coming. The group murmurs guesses. Widow's plea, inheritance claim, last will dispute. The answer? Cases involving exiles petitioning for return. The scent of longing, apparently, is botanically complex. Historians still argue whether these legal perfumes were symbolic or functional. Some say they were spiritual aids, designed to please the gods listening from the beyond. Others suggest they were psychological, helping litigants center themselves or gently nudge a judge's perception. A few even propose they were diagnostic, used to test emotional honesty based on scent response. The olfactory lie detector, if you will. You begin to realize something else. The blends are old, yes, but they've changed over time. Nefer mentions her mother's version of the grievance oil smelled more like figs and vinegar. Her grandmother's, pure coriander and ash. The core ideas remain, but interpretation evolves, like justice itself. The final bottle is unmarked, no symbol. Just a worn little flask with a broken stopper and a faint residue of resin around the rim. No one knows what's inside, not even Nefer. A ceremonial shrug goes around the circle, and the smallest among you is nominated to uncap it. A boy with a missing front tooth and a serious sense of ceremony approaches the bottle, sniffs, then falls backward dramatically onto the cushions. "Smells like crocodile breath," he shouts. Naturally, everyone has to try it. You brace yourself, lean in, and it's indescribable. Salty, earthy, a little like the inside of a clay oven after someone baked dates in it, then left a sandal behind. One of the older perfumers squints thoughtfully. This might have been a deterrent blend, worn by temple guards to keep people from approaching. Ah yes, the original personal space enforcer. The mood turns from playful to pensive. Nefer clears her throat and picks up a small reed stylus. "There's one more exercise," she says. "You don't have to speak. Just close your eyes. When I dab this scent beneath your nose, say the first image that comes to mind." She doesn't tell you which blend she's using. You close your eyes. A scent unfurls like the tide, saffron, sandalwood, and something like river stone warmed by the sun. What comes to mind? You speak without thinking. A boat, mid-river, going somewhere I forgot I knew. There's a moment of silence, like the whole court inhaled together. Nefer murmurs, "That's the perfume of Mott, the one meant to align the heart." Others take their turns. Some describe animals, others memories. One man sees his dead brother, fishing. A girl sees a house she's never been to. A priestess sees the color blue. Not sky, not water, but something in between. Perfume, you realize, is memory in vapor form, time dissolved in oil. And tonight, Thebes is steeped in both. You leave just before full dark, perfumed papyri tucked under your arm, lotus pendant against your chest. The streets are now alive with nighttime sounds, laughter, drums, the clatter of someone dropping an amphora and swearing softly in the dark, probably PG-13. As you reach your sleeping quarters, you pause at the threshold. The air inside is still, scented faintly with the saffron blend you left burning this morning. A single note in a long, fragrant story. You lie down, close your eyes, and dream in scent. Night deepens like ink pooling in the sky. Your eyelids flutter, heavy as papyrus sheets pressed under a summer sun. The sounds of Thebes soften into a distant hum, like a lullaby whispered from the banks of the Nile. Before you drift entirely away, your mind returns once more to the curious relationship between scent and law. The ancient Egyptians, it seems, didn't just use perfume to feel nice or impress a neighbor. They wrapped it into the very fabric of their justice system, like threads woven through fine linen. You imagine a courtroom not just filled with voices, but with fragrances. Judges inhaling the subtle hints of frankincense, jurors catching whiffs of myrrh, witnesses trembling with the musk of civet. A trial becomes a multi-sensory experience, as much about what you smell as what you say. There's a certain gentle irony here. Perfume, often associated with luxury and pleasure, becomes a tool for truth and fairness. The very things that could distract or seduce are used instead to clarify and confirm. You recall a story Nefer told about a particular case from centuries ago. A wealthy merchant accused of cheating a widow out of her inheritance. The widow, known for her strong sense of smell, wore a perfume blend meant to evoke honesty and sorrow. The merchant, meanwhile, was drenched in something overpowering, maybe cedar and spice, to mask his guilt. When the widow entered the courtroom, the air shifted. The judges inhaled deeply, and witnesses seemed to straighten their backs, as if summoned by invisible threads of scent to tell the truth. Some historians suggest that perfumes like these were early forms of truth serum, more psychological than chemical. The idea being that smell can influence mood, lower defenses, and encourage openness. But others argue it's all symbolic, part of a ritual designed to invoke divine witness. After all, the Egyptians believed their gods were always present in the courts, judging not just actions but intentions. The debate continues, softly, like the fading echo of temple bells. Meanwhile, you think about how different justice smells today. You imagine the sterile scent of courtrooms, the rustle of paper, and the faint aroma of coffee cups abandoned on desks. How far removed that is from frankincense and lotus petals. The next morning, you wake to the gentle scent of saffron and sandalwood still lingering in your room, a ghost of last night's dreams. It feels like a soft reminder that justice, like perfume, is about more than what you see or hear. It's about feeling, sensing, understanding. And maybe, just maybe, it's about remembering that sometimes the smallest things, the faintest whiff of a flower or spice, can tip the scales. You smile, curl back into your pillow, and let the sense of Thebes carry you into the softest sleep. The morning sun peeks shyly over the horizon, casting a gentle glow that makes the ancient city of Thebes seem almost dreamlike. You stretch beneath your linen sheets, the lingering scent of incense, a comforting thread tying you back to the world you've just wandered. Today, your thoughts settle on the people behind the perfumes, the artisans, the scribes, the women who brewed these mysterious oils in quiet corners of bustling bazaars. Their hands knew the language of petals and resins, transforming earth and flower into invisible stories. You picture Nefer again, carefully mixing her secret blends, eyes flicking between jars like a composer tuning instruments before a concert. You imagine how much trust was placed in her craft, how a few drops could sway a verdict, ease a grievance, or even heal a restless mind. Perfume wasn't just decoration, it was communication, silent, subtle, but powerful. It was the softest advocate, the gentlest witness, and the quietest comfort. You reflect on the unique role scent played in ancient Egyptian law, a bridge between the tangible and the spiritual, between human frailty and divine order. The fragrances offered a kind of balance, a way to bring fairness wrapped in calm, complexity wrapped in simplicity. Historians still puzzle over many details, how exactly these perfumes were used during trials, or how much effect they truly had on judgments. But what you know for sure is that in this culture, justice was as much about presence and perception as it was about facts and testimony. As you lie in the warmth of early morning, your thoughts slow to a gentle rhythm. The world outside moves quickly, but here, in the soft spaces between memory and scent, time stretches wide and welcoming. The perfumes, the stories, the history, they fade gradually, like twilight melting into night, and you feel a quiet peace, knowing you've traveled somewhere rare and fragrant. So now, as you close your eyes for the last time tonight, breathe deeply. Imagine the soft amber glow of temple lamps, the quiet murmur of a Nile breeze, and the faint, soothing scent of kifi drifting through the air. May these gentle stories and their fragrant echoes cradle you into a calm, restful sleep. Sweet dreams.